Good afternoon, or should I say good day, because Coastie Explorers is on tour here in Australia. Today you join me from Hartley Historic Village. We're about 120 kilometres west of Sydney here. The English first arrived here in 1788, and it took about 35 years for them to try and find a passage west through the Blue Mountains to the tablelands and the flatlands to the west. I guess a bit like with America, with Manifest Destiny, they wanted to explore what was the other side of the Blue Mountains, and here we can see we have these beautiful fertile lands for people to grow things, for cattle to graze, and most importantly, minerals. And one mineral in particular, gold. Behind me you can see the Great Western Highway. Now, by 1830, around 800 convicts were working on building this road connecting Sydney with the western part and towns that we now know of Lithgow and Bathurst. Now, when you've got lots of convicts in the area and lots of people moving out west, you are going to need some law and order. So, first port of call is going to be the courthouse here in Hartley. Let's check it out. In each of these rooms they've got these holograms telling you the story, and one of the ladies there has just told me all about the whipping that used to take place. This is a cat o' nine tails here, and people would be strapped to this bench here and given 25 lashes, 50 lashes, depending on what they did. Anything bigger, such as murder, things like that, they were tried at a bigger court, probably down in Sydney. Right, let's head through to the holding cells. Looks like they've got wooden walls, but obviously with stone exterior. We've got some bars on the window here, but what is really cool is that you can still see the graffiti from the prisoners who were here back in the 1830s, 1840s. Amazing. Now, there is a famous saying, it didn't even have a pot to pee in, and there it is. That bucket there is what you would have had to go to toilet in back in this cell. Right, let's head through. So that left-hand side there was the police station part, I guess, with the holding cells, and here on the right-hand side is the entrance to the court buildings. Presumably, this was a clerk's office back in the day. And the moment you walk in all of these rooms, they start talking and telling you the history of the place. Yes, this was indeed the clerk's room and a post office apparently in the 1840s. Right, let's head through to the next room. Just outside the courthouse now, and here it is. Wow. Yes. Here we go. We are in the court, dating back to the 1840s. We can see we've got Queen Victoria up here on the wall, a very young Queen Victoria in the 1840s, and the royal crest at the back.
swear that the evidence touching this complaint shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Order.
Forwarded to Penrith, since we are informed that a charge of robbery is to be preferred against them at that court. How much would those things be worth? No? The court finds both prisoners of the bar guilty of...
What an interesting place. Not a great YouTuber's dream, because everywhere you walk they start talking, but a very interesting building. In the courthouse there, learn that 35 lashes for drunkenness. Plenty of you out there, I'm sure, could get some lashes back in 1830s. And also just for using bad language and being insolent, 50 lashes. So, not a nice time to be around. Okay, let's carry on round Hartley Historic Village. Just across from the courthouse we have St Bernard's Catholic Church and the presbytery, which is the housing for the priests right next door. Before this was built in 1848, they used the courthouse for their services. This is one of two churches in this very small village. So let's go in and take a little look around. Unfortunately, we can't go in the presbytery next door. It is now accommodation, so if you do want to stay here just west of Sydney, then book yourself the presbytery. What a great place to stay for the night. A couple of really cool things here. We've got the altar, which is white sandstone, which was hand carved apparently. Beautiful looking altar. And then at the back of the church we've got this wonderful confession booth. In Catholicism, most churches tend to have these confession booths where you go in one side, draw the curtain, the priest goes in the other side, and then you tell the priest all the bad things that you've been doing that you would like forgiveness from God from. Catholic churches all over Australia. Many of those early convicts were Irish and of the Catholic faith, but just as many Catholics as Protestants coming over in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Now, the rangers just told me that I can go behind the altar and ring a bell. So let's have a little go through the curtain. See if I can ring this bell. I can see it's above the door. Here we go. There we go. Everyone hears the call to prayer and comes to church. There we go. Lovely little Catholic church here in Hartley. Let's keep walking around. Now when you first get to Hartley, do stop into the visitor centre to see the ranger there, because you can pay to go into the church and to the courthouse, a little bit of money, but everything else is free to look around. Right, here we have what every village needs, the pub. This was the Shamrock Inn, now quite dilapidated in looking, but I'm sure was a very busy place when you got convicts and you've got gold miners in the 1850s coming out here. They need a place to stay and they need alcohol and food, and the Shamrock Inn was the place. So let's have a little look around the building. Just behind me we've got Gold Rush Antiques. Now what I love about this part of Australia, all these little old towns, is that there are lots of antique stores all over the place. You can pick up some little gems, so next time you're in this region, get yourself down to an antique store. As we make our way up the hillside, we can see a Tor on the top, Ean Tor. Now T-O-R, that's an English word. Well, we do use it in England, mainly in the southwest, for a group of rocks, sort of an outcrop. Now, I did research and found out it's not a Celtic word, it's not a Breton word as I thought it was, it's actually a Welsh word for outcrop. So there we go, Tor. Use it next time you see some rocks on a hill. Now, before we had indoor toilets, we had privies, outdoor ones, and we can see one here, a 4-seater one, just behind the post office. So you can post your letter and spend a penny. Now, once you're established as a settlement, you need a way of communicating. So this was the old post office. Before it was at the courthouse, but then this was built in the 1840s by the Finn family. That suggests that that is an Irish name, and next door we have the Trarley Cottage as well, also a town from Ireland. So I'm thinking most of the people living in this town were in fact Irish immigrants here, or convicts that were sent over on the ships back in the late early 1800s. Now, interestingly, gold was found west of Sydney here from the 1830s, 1840s onwards, but the government wanted to keep it quiet. With all the convicts working in this area, they didn't want it let known that there was gold in their hills, so they kept it quiet. But then in the 1850s, with the California gold rush, people were suddenly heading out there or down to Victoria, and they needed gold miners. So that's when it became public, and that's when they started mining the gold here and then sending it to the mint in Sydney on Macquarie Street. Come down to the end of the street here in Hartley and you can see the original bridge over the River Lett here. Now, of course, every settlement needs a water source. Sydney gets 80% of its water, I think still today, from all the water that flows from the Blue Mountains just around the corner. Now, of course, it's important to note at this time that we are on Aboriginal land. Now, there were 3 different Aboriginal peoples who contested this land even to this day. So let's find out a little bit more about those 3 different types of people and the problems that the British brought to them when they arrived here in Australia. Indigenous peoples have been living on the lands of Australia for tens of thousands of years. Here is a map of the First Nations tribes of Australia. There are about 500 different Aboriginal peoples in Australia, each with their own language and territory, and usually made up of a large number of separate clans. The Hartley Valley west of the Blue Mountains was a traditional meeting place for 3 of these people, the Gudungara, the Darug and the Wiradjuri. Blackfellas Hang Caves was one such meeting place and still shows the hands, weapons and figures through ochre stencil art. As nomadic people roaming the lands during different seasons, Aboriginal people always saw the land as common and accessible to everybody. When the British arrived, land ownership and farming became the norm, and the first peoples found this concept extremely foreign. This led to conflicts between the British and the First Peoples, the largest of which occurred in 1824 on the river flats near the town of Bathurst, when a farmer named Antonio Jose Rodriguez made a friendly gesture by offering some potatoes to a group of passing Wiradjuri people. The following day, the Wiradjuri families returned to the field, but they did not understand the concept of private ownership of food supplies, so they began taking the potatoes for themselves. Reacting to this, the farmer opened fire on the group, leading to a chaotic situation where several Wiradjuri people were killed and some were wounded. This lack of understanding of each other's cultures led to the Bathurst War between the Wiradjuri and the British. With the British sending the might of their army and weapons into the area, the Bathurst Wars represented a major setback in the relationship between the British settlers and the Aboriginal Wiradjuri people, further entrenching mistrust, conflict and the erosion of indigenous rights and sovereignty in the region. The British also brought diseases such as smallpox, and this greatly impacted the Aboriginal populations. To find out more about how the British used alcohol as a tool to subjugate the first people, check out part 2 of my video from Sydney. Just up the hill a little bit we have the Royal Hotel. I think one of the oldest hotels, boarding houses here for people travelling through Hartley back in the 1800s. And right opposite we have the Anglican church here. So 2 churches, Catholic one down in the village itself, and just up the hill we have the Anglican church here. Definitely making use of the sandstone in the locals' hills here. This church built in 1857, 10 years after the Catholic Church. And then just behind the church here we actually have Bungaree, which is the oldest house built here, again by Mr. Finn back in the 1840s. Right, that brings us to the end of our tour of the historic town of Hartley today. Hope you've enjoyed it. And let's travel around Australia, and we'll catch you on the next one.